Good evening, good evening. 1, 2, 3, 4.
When was the last time it was checked? Heads will roll.
Heads will roll. There we go. Yay! Okay, thanks everybody for the technical patience. And welcome to the Contented Cow for the second of our series, CowTalks. These are a series of debates, discussions, presentations, and panels on local, regional, national, and international issues. The topics are varied, but chosen because they are both important and yet controversial. In today's world, particularly here in the US, we have freedom of speech, and yet we are pressurized to not speak about many things. We're hoping to change that in a very small way here at CowTalks. We expect that all participants and members of the audience will behave in a civil manner. The presenter this evening, Ms. Paula Overby, who was a candidate for the United States House of Representatives and to represent Congressional District 2 in this past election. Although the Mankato-based group CPL Action, who put a full-page ad in the Northfield News protesting the MSHSL policy on transgender student athletes, was invited to participate this evening, they declined, stating, "Since the Minnesota State High School League has made its decision already, the time for that debate has long passed." Therefore, Ms. Overby will be presenting alone this evening. She will take about an hour to share some of her own personal experiences, give general information about transgender issues, as well as some information about how the MSHSL decision relates to Title IX and to the future of girls and women in sports. Ms. Overby has said that she welcomes questions during her presentation. But if you want to wait to the end, that's fine too, because following the conclusion of her presentation, we will have additional time for questions from the audience. If you like, you can submit your questions in writing, and there are pieces of paper on your table, or you can state your question verbally. There are 3 things I ask of you to observe this evening. The first is please turn off your cell phones. The second is that we will be videotaping and taking photos of this evening's event. By your presence here tonight, we assume that you are granting permission for the Cow to use photos or videos of you on our website and YouTube. Please read the entire consent notice on your table for more information about this. The third thing that I ask you to observe to note is that the views expressed in the CowTalks presentation series, debates, and discussions are not necessarily endorsed by the Contented Cow. The Contented Cow does endorse freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry. So thank you very much, and I'd like to turn the microphone over to Paula. Here you go.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. I hope this will be interesting and kind of fun. I haven't focused, I'm not focusing a tremendous amount of the discussion on transgender issues. One reason I encourage people to ask questions. I'm certainly open to discussing any of my personal experiences or my past experience or answering whatever questions you might have. I'm here to respond to the full-page ads that the Child Protection League ran, opposing the Minnesota State High School League policy on transgender student athletes. I'm here to suggest that their ads really have very little to do with transgender issues. I really wish that they were here to defend themselves, because I'm further going to suggest that the Child Protection League really has very little to do with child protection. And I'm further going to suggest that really it's an organization that wants to perpetuate a patriarchal cultural myth that women were created to serve men. And that in return, they're going to protect us from men in our showers. That's probably a little bit like the mob offering protection to shop owners for protection from the mob. Needless to say, I'm not a big fan of the Child Protection League. I'm not a big fan of the ads they ran. But I'll say a little bit about my background first. I'm a graduate of the University of Minnesota. I have a degree in psychology, second degree in computer science. I spent several years as a community-based mental health counselor, and most of my career as a systems analyst in IT. I'm a mom. I raised 3 kids. Of course, I'm also a transgender woman, and being a transgender mom has presented some rather unique challenges. More than happy to talk about that if anybody wants to ask about it. I've been active in transgender civil rights since 2007 when I helped to organize the first Transgender Civil Rights March in Minneapolis. At that time, it was during the Pride Festival. I don't know if any of you are familiar with the Pride Festival in Minneapolis, but the Pride Committee refused to allow us anywhere near Pride Park. So things have changed dramatically in the past 7 years, and that's the good news. But the bad news, of course, is that we still have a really long way to go. I spent also 4 years in family court, acting as my own attorney, representing the child custody rights of transgender parents. I'm pleased to say that I did eventually win that case, if you can call any court case a win. I've examined gender issues from a pretty broad perspective. I'm certified as an advocate for victims of sexual violence in both Hennepin counties and Dakotas County. I'm a community educator teaching sexual health for the Minnesota AIDS Project. I've facilitated groups for children of childhood sexual abuse, and I'm a trained presenter for the Among Men Project. I could easily talk about transgender issues for an hour, but I think that would probably be kind of boring to most of you, quite honestly. So I'm going to talk a little more about how the issue of transgender girls really relates to the broader issue of gender equity and the future of girls' athletics. I spent 7 or 8 years presenting as bigender. And if that's confusing, don't worry, because nobody knows what that means. In a practical sense, what it meant is that I spent my social life presenting as a man in a dress. It worked. Okay, I got to socialize as a woman and maintain all of those roles that I had as a male. Father, husband, provider. I've been on both sides of the fence. I've seen the worst of both sides. And I know that gender stereotypes affect men as well as women. So I don't want people to see me as a feminist that hates men. I love men. But this particular discussion is about transgender girls, so it is focused on women. During that time I spent as a man in a dress, I probably answered hundreds of questions. In some ways it was kind of an exciting time and a very challenging time and a very interesting time because people ask amazing questions. And you know, every time I felt like I'd heard it all, you know, somebody would come up with something new. Just recently somebody asked me about my husband. And most people wouldn't have to think about that, right? But it gave me pause, and I thought for a minute, and finally I just said I'm single. Because sometimes you're just not in the mood for really, really long explanations. But all during that time, but you know, as a transgender person, if you want to be recognized, if you want to be accepted, you really need to be out and visible and share your stories with people. And I would say that probably one of the most interesting questions I've heard was, why would you want to be a woman? And in a lot of ways, think about it. In a lot of ways, it's also a very disconcerting question because it really goes to the foundation of this whole issue. No man would want to be a woman, and there's some very profound reasons why that is. And most of us at a subcognitive level are aware of that. So we understand gender issues, but we don't talk about them. So this is the policy here. I probably won't spend too much time on this. This number 2 here talks about, what is required for a transgender girl to play transgender girl sports. And basically, she needs some statement, some support from her parents, friends, family, some history of the idea that she's been presenting as a girl for a while. This policy, if you've met any of these parents, this policy is really written for parents. Because if you have a transgender child and you recognize that and you're open enough to raise your child as a transgender girl, then you deal with, as a parent, all of the rules and regulations that discriminate against your child. That's one of the things that people are trying to address. If anybody really wants to know some of the issues of being a parent of a transgender child, I'd recommend a movie called Trans, the movie. Really brings some of those issues to light. My circumstance, of course, is a little bit different. I am the transgender parent, so that's a little unusual as well. Questions? Does anybody want to know more about this policy? Does anyone have an idea of what this policy means?
No idea.
Yeah,
Okay.
Could you summarize it for us?
Yeah, so basically what it's, we're talking about children here now, young children in junior high school that have really pretty much lived their lives as girls. We're talking about children here that have probably been living their lives as girls for several years. And so the policy basically says that those children can apply to the board for permission to play on girls' teams. That's it. And it just lists out some of the documentation and that proves or demonstrates that they are in fact living as that gender. And it's pretty specific from the context of this binary gender that we have. We're talking about children that basically have lived their lives as the opposite gender from their from their assigned gender. And so we're talking about still girls and boys. We're not talking about transition really. We're talking about girls that have really lived their lives as girls. And that's very, the policy is pretty clear and specific about that. It lists pretty clear and specific requirements, totally contrary to what the Child Protection League has presented in their ads. Is that helpful?
Does it go the other way too? A young man who's lived as a girl?
Yeah, that's a great question. You'll notice that the policy does apply specifically from male to female. And I'll get into this some more as I talk about Title IX and creating opportunities for women. The policy isn't really applicable for female to male because the presumption is that females are the ones that need the assistance and the opportunity. Girls can already play on male teams if they choose to. Some schools actually have co-ed teams. So from that perspective, this policy is really pretty trivial, but so it only applies for male to female. And again, I'll probably get in a little bit more, say a little bit more about that kind of gender discrimination and how we're minimizing women with these modes of protection. We're not looking at these girls as looking at them as kind of like girls that need protection. Yeah, just male to female. Although, I guess I'll mention that later on. Female to male is about as common. We just don't hear about it. What's that?
Paula, it said in the ad, in the big ad, that a male can take a shower with your 14-year-old daughter. That was the inflammatory statement.
Right.
What's the actual truth of the matter?
Can we hold off on that just a minute? I'll be bringing up the ads here in a minute and we can talk about that specific ad. Anybody know who this is?
Jim Ross.
Come on, this is the Shy Group. Somebody knows who this is.
Santa Claus.
Santa Claus, thank you. Great guy, I love this guy. How can you not love this guy? He's a jolly guy, he brings presents to the kids. I believe in Santa Claus. And the problem with believing in Santa Claus, of course, is that we've been told a lot of things about Santa Claus that are not completely accurate, right? And people will right away jump on that to challenge a really meaningful cultural tradition. I know as well as anybody that reindeer can't fly. I also know that men cannot walk on water. And yet there will be those that will ask me to suspend that disbelief in favor of the idea that they can interpret the will of God, that they know the boundaries of the magnificence and the diversity of God's creation. And the point being that a lot of what we believe really is not based on irrefutable physical evidence. That's the point I want to make. And the same thing is true about sex and gender. We've been told a lot of things that are not completely accurate. And hopefully I can try to clear up a couple of those things. Love this guy. All right, the two terms I want to clarify here. That's pretty good. I'm not going to load you down with a bunch of terminology about transgender. Two that you should know, though, are cis and trans. This is how the community distinguishes between girls that were identified as girls when they were born and girls that were identified as boys when they were born. So one of these girls is transgender. At her birth, the doctor determined that she would be a boy, and they put male on her birth certificate, and probably her parents, assuming she would be a boy, tried to raise her as a boy. The other girl is trans means that her gender as a girl is different than her assigned gender, which was boy. The other girl is cisgender, means when she was born, the doctor decided she would be a female, and they put female on her birth certificate. She remains a girl, and so she's cisgendered because her gender matches what she was assigned at birth. Does that make sense?
No.
Everybody get that? Cis and trans? So a trans girl is a girl that was identified as a boy when she was born. Okay, her gender identity is different from her assigned sex at birth.
And that's based on her physical characteristics at birth.
That's how doctors make that determination, yeah. Now, generally, anatomically, for the most part, that's pretty clear. But there are a lot of people that are born, they call them ambiguous births, okay? It's not clear to the doctor whether they're male or female. I'll touch on some of that a little later on, some of the more extreme examples, but it's fairly common actually. And that's one of the things that we're not really told about. Very few of us probably know an intersex person. I know some of you have heard the term hermaphrodite. Okay, it's what we used to call them. In the Bible, they call them eunuchs. Indians call them, they have, the Native American populations had quite a few, actually named those. They had more than one gender. So it's fairly common actually. That's the nature of sex and gender. It's based on a lot of different chromosomes and hormones and a whole range of things that can produce a whole range of possibilities. Does that answer the question? Maybe I went on much farther than you needed. So one of these girls is cisgender. We know what that means? And one of these girls is transgender. You know what that means? Anyone care to guess which is which?
50-50 chance.
You got a 50-50 chance, yeah. The girl in blue, she was elected homecoming queen by her class. She's 16 years old at the time of this photo. So young people are not nearly as stressed out about this issue as us older folks. Cis and trans. Okay, so here's the ads. What did I want to say about these? I talked about parents of transgender children. This is really a non-trivial issue for them. This is a major issue for them. They're dealing with a lot of school issues and school board issues and trying to get help for their children. I think for the rest of us, it's probably a pretty trivial issue. There's very few transgender people in the population, actually. Estimates are currently maybe about 0.5% female and another 0.5% male. The CPL, the Child Protection League here, put out these ads trying to create a whole bunch of social anxiety, warnings about males showering with 14-year-old girls, 14-year-old daughters, and the end of girls' sports. I mean, these ads really are so absurd that they don't even really deserve a response. But I'm going to respond to them anyway. As far as showers, first of all, they're talking about a male here, and they're trying to emphasize the fact that men are going to be attacking 14-year-old girls in the shower. The reality, of course, is that 14-year-old girls have enough body issues already, as do 14-year-old boys. And the movement in a lot of schools that I've talked to or visited is really just to move away from showers altogether. And one of the interesting things I would say with respect to this particular issue that's being raised by the Child Protection League is that one of the things that was removed from the original draft policy was the guidelines about privacy. I can tell you that transgender people, girls, have their own issues about privacy, right? And so they probably don't want to be in this situation either. So does that answer your question? Or would you like to know more about this whole issue of showers?
Well, to me it implies that there's no process whereby the male who wants to shower with the girl, there's no process whereby you establish the protocols,
Well,
background.
I mean, we're not talking about males here showering with girls. We're talking about girls, transgender girls showering with other girls. Okay, would either of these girls be allowed to shower with your 14-year-old daughter?
Well, I don't know.
This is what we're talking about here.
Yes.
This is the reality. Okay. Let me move on to, and then, in politics, what I really find disturbing about these ads is just the inherent sexism involved here, okay, and how much it minimizes female athletes. Most female athletes that I know could easily outperform most of the boys in the school. And that's not being recognized here. And quite honestly, if a transgender girl gets appropriate medical treatment prior to that natural transition of puberty, she's probably going to be at a little bit of a disadvantage to other girls because she's not going to have the same testosterone levels as a normal female, quite honestly. That's the reality. And so this is just total misinformation. They're not they don't say a 14-year-old boy wants to shower with your 14-year-old daughter. They're specifically using male to invoke images of child predators coming into our high schools and preying on our daughters. It's horrible imagery. It's horribly sexist, and it's a horrible attack against girls and women.
Paula, I'm really confused. That's probably because I'm 83 years old, and
That's
this
perfectly
issue.
all right. I've been confused
I
a lot
can't
of my life
imagine
as well.
where this issue would have been when I was in high school, because we didn't talk about anything. But what confuses me today is when you talk about a transgender person. And first of all, I don't know how you can talk about a transgender boy or a girl, because if they're in transition, I'm not sure, in my ignorance, where they're coming from and where they're going to. But the inflammatory ad would infer, I would infer from the inflammatory ad, that a person with male characteristics but intending to be a transgender to a female was now going to get to play and shower with women. Is that right?
That's the idea that they're trying to create here. Yes, that a person, let's call them a person, that might have some or all, or might have some male anatomical parts. Basically, I don't know, can I use anatomical names here?
Yeah.
Basically, a person with a penis, okay, is how we define a man. Anyone that doesn't have one is pretty much how we define a female. Yes, that person would probably still have that anatomy. But if they're transitioning, and I'll show you some more illustrations here and get into this in a little more detail. But if that person is taking female hormones, estrogen, and hormone blockers is not getting the effects of testosterone, then that person is going to develop like a girl, okay? She will be a girl. She will look like a girl. And that's kind of the nature of sex and gender that we don't understand, that we've never really heard about. Quite honestly, from a biological standpoint, we all start out as female, in the womb as a fetus. And without testosterone, we would all be females, quite honestly. This is the nature of sexuality, or sex and gender. And yeah, that's hard to get your mind around. I fully appreciate that. I am transgender. Spent my whole life thinking I was the only one, trying to understand what was wrong with me. It took me a long time to really accept that, well, this is just what it is. I don't care what society is telling me. They're wrong. And now, fortunately, we're starting to come forward with a lot of the medical evidence that supports the reality. Okay, it's not just something that's in my head, which is what the Child Protection League would want us all to believe. I'll cover that some more if that's not helpful. Let's do a few more slides and see if it if I can clarify that a little bit. So this is the image of a trans girl that the Child Protection League wants us to have. Okay. This is a man, all right. I'm sorry, we can all recognize that. I don't know, if this guy could convince his mother that he's a girl, then I guess he could play on girls' teams. This is Clay Matthews. He's I don't know much about football, but he plays for Green Bay, and I think he's, probably a tight end or a running back or something like that. This is what attorney John D. Hagan offers us. He offered us this following scenario. He's representing the Child Protection League here. You can read it, I guess. An adolescent counterpart of Clay Matthews comes before your school board. He declares, "I always have had a feminine self-image. I never told anyone because of society's expectations. But I'm revealing it now. My long hair is evidence of my sincerity and my feminine self-expression. And just imagine Clay Matthews looking like bowling girls over under the basket. Again, I hope people can see some of the absurdity of this, because this is the imagery that they want, and just this idea of predator. Okay, if we're talking about male, masculine, tough guy sports, okay, that idea of predator takes on a whole different meaning than it does when we're talking about gender issues. And so this is kind of my own sensationalized imagery here. That's an ad he did for a workout circuit or something. But and I can tell you for certain that if Clay Matthews had started taking estrogen at 14 and lived his life as a girl, he would not be playing for the NFL. That's one thing I can tell you for certain, and this relates to this juxtaposition here, football, and kind of goes to the whole issue of women, girls, and women's athletics, and the future of girls and women's athletics, and I'll get into that some more. But this is just ridiculous. The real threat here from the Child Protection League is not about transgender girls. It's about Title IX and the future of girls' sports. So there is a threat here against opportunities for girls and women. And that's what I want to get into here more. And it's not transgender girls. So we're still confused about this idea of biological gender. People that oppose transgender people will talk about biological gender, that they have to play on the team of their biological gender. And this is where the confusion comes in. This is the model that most of us have grown up with. Okay, it's all in the genes. You're born a boy, you're born a girl, that's that. Females are XX chromosomes, males have XY chromosomes. I don't know how much people know about genetics, but that little Y there is what makes males men. And we just believe that there's this clear solid line down the middle. And that's simply not true. It's really more like this. Sexuality and gender are genetic, okay? They have a distribution, just like height. Oh, sorry about that. You guys aren't ready for this. There's a distribution to characteristics of sex and gender, just as there is with any other genetic characteristic, hair color or height, or and we're isolated from this group in the middle here, okay, where you see the purple. This is where the transgender people would fall in there somewhere. We tend to try and mask out those people with presentation, things like dress and makeup and hairstyles, rules, conventions. Young children would be very difficult to distinguish if we didn't dress them in gender-specific clothing and give them hairstyles. Even at that, sometimes I used to laugh when I would be out with my daughter grocery shopping or something, and I have her dressed up in some cute little pink dress, and somebody would come by and say, "Is that a boy or a girl?" Well, trying to make that clear. But children, and that's basically true up until puberty. Where they go through a natural transition. They're transitioning from childhood, a fairly gender-neutral physical condition, to becoming a man or a woman. So, what was I? Let me see. And some of the other medical things that are evolving. It isn't just about the physical anatomy we have under our skirts or in our pants. There's structural differences in the brain. Male brains are different than female brains. and that's a lot of that research now is just starting to come forward, and they're starting to see that some of those differences exist in transsexual women as well. So this idea that men are men and women are women and never the twain shall meet is just not medically or genetically accurate. And that's a really hard thing for most of us to accept when we've grown up with this binary model of gender. The other thing that's kind of disturbing about the way the Child Protection League presents this is that they would have us believe that that all these genetic variations in the middle here, there's a whole bunch of different names for it. There's transgender, transsexuals, genderqueer, but they would have us believe that's not a genetic variation, that's not biological, that's not physical, that's just a failure of socialization. They would suggest that those of us that are in that middle ground there are mentally ill or had abusive fathers or are possessed by the devil. That's their explanation. It's a failure of socialization. But if you look at the other side of it, then now if it comes to issues like rape or domestic abuse or intimate partner violence, then it's that's not a failure of socialization. That's just genetic determination. It's like men are men and boys are boys, and there's really nothing we can do about that. That's a serious contradiction in the way we treat gender in this culture. And I haven't, I have some information I can present on that if we have a little time left and if anybody's interested. But that's a serious contradiction in their arguments. That men's behavior is basically genetically determined and there's really no hope of modifying that, and so we're just going to have to protect our girls by making sure we keep men out of the showers. So I don't go along with that whole line of reasoning either. It maintains the idea that women are inferior, are weak, are generally not going to make it without the protection of a man. And that doesn't bode well really for either gender and the kind of relationships that we want to see. And the consequences are evident. We have a 50% divorce rate in this culture. That's just the beginning. So it's a contradiction. I was, for example, from my own personal experience, in 7th grade, I was forced to shower naked with the boys. That was a horrible experience. And pretty much from that day forward, I kind of lived my life in fear. I lived my life in isolation. I lived my life practicing behaviors that felt completely unnatural to me. And as a transgender woman, a person that's highly visible, running for Congress, I got some pretty ugly things in my inbox on a pretty regular basis. So there's some significant anger and hate out there that focuses around this idea of gender. And that's not a good thing for our culture either, and these young girls that are transgender should not have to deal with it. Yes, sir?
Yes, about 20 years ago, I engaged a social acquaintance in Illinois and was asked to do a music show. And I said, of course, Maureen, I'd be happy to do a music show at your restaurant. And she owned a piano store, a music store. And I got there and she said, now, I want you to know before you do this music show, my crowd after 10 is going to be a little unusual. I said, why would that be unusual? I said, I'm here to do music for all of you. all of you that are here. And Richie Sullins was one of the band Triad. He was with me, and we, of course, he and the band, we did the show. And at 10 o'clock, when everything was supposed to change, everyone of what appeared to be of the same sex dancing with each other. During intermission, they said, "How do you feel?" I said, "What do you mean, how do I feel? I feel great." We continued on with the show. Well, Maureen was transgender. Thank you very much.
It sounds like it was a positive experience.
Positive.
Yeah, and that's fantastic. For a lot of men, that would be very difficult because that's again part of what our culture teaches us. This is one rate. This is one of the reasons why the homicide rate for transgender women is extremely high. Because men love them. Men find out that they were a man, and then the homophobia that's so pervasive in this culture feeds that energy. So I'm glad that you had that positive experience.
I had that positive experience, and I always believe that we should be non-discriminating. We're addressing the person as they are. We accept them as they are.
I appreciate that. Yeah, dating for a trans woman is a challenge. I don't date actually, but maybe I will at some point. There's so many rules and regulations and policy and culture that we've developed around this idea of binary genders. That's kind of the challenge of the transgender community, is that we challenge all of that normative thinking, all of those traditions that we've grown up with, and it does culturally, legally, it does make it somewhat difficult. And similar to the issue of marriage equality, some of the people said, well, why don't we just accommodate them with domestic partnerships, or make a separate set of rules for the same-sex couples? Well, the problem with that is that we've evolved so much law around the idea of heterosexual marriage that accomplishing that task would be unbearable. And so that's the ultimate, really the simplest solution from a society standpoint is just make it all the same. That solution doesn't apply to transgender politics. And so transgender politics and the transgender civil rights movement has a long way to go. It's faced with a lot of significant challenges. This simple policy change for allowing trans girls to play on athletics. It's not even a legal issue. It's just a school policy recommendation. And yet we have all these lawyers creating all this hysteria about lawsuits. And that's what the rest of us get to deal with as a culture, is all of these challenges to things that really ought to be quite simple. That we need to have some faith in the teachers that we hire, and the school administrators that we hire, and the school board that we have. These are capable people that can make reasonable decisions about these kinds of simple issues. And yet the Child Protection League wants to turn it into this huge major courtroom battle for us. That's kind of, as a culture, that's kind of what we're up against. That's kind of the issue that the transgender civil rights movement presents. But thank you very much for that positive note of acceptance and hope.
And I have 4 children, 2 different marriages. Upon my 3rd marriage, I'm married to a lady here in Northfield. She has 5 children, I have 4 in our history.
Congratulations.
And
And
yet,
then they're all going to be open and accepting, right? So you're making a huge impact on the population here in Northfield. That's 9 children. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna move forward here. We're still talking about this idea of biological gender, right? And I think I probably got locked out here too. Right? Okay, that reminds me of one quick anecdote here. We're just about running out of time here.
Got plenty of time. No panic.
There we go. I was talking about the differences in brain structures for men and women, males and females, whatever. One of the interesting differences between male brains and female brains is that females process language on both sides of both hemispheres. Our brain is divided in half, which tends to explain why women talk so much, right? That's one of those gender stereotypes that simply isn't true. Men talk a lot more than women do. But the idea that women talk too much is really kind of descends from the idea that they shouldn't talk at all, or that they gossip too much. So just a little note on one of those gender stereotypes that we have in this culture. Okay, here are some transgender women. So when we're talking about trans women, we're talking about what we would normally think of as women. 4 of these women were identified as female at birth. All these women have XY chromosomes. They have no female reproductive parts. They have, most of them, testosterone levels that would be just as high as a male. 4 of them were identified as female at birth. 4 of them, and 3 of them are transgender. Anybody care to guess who the trans girls are? Do any of these look like Clay Matthews?
Mary must be. Is Mary?
What's that?
Is Mary trans?
Mary is trans, yep.
Okay.
That's let me see, that is Jenna Talkova. She was the 2012 Miss Universe candidate pageant contestant.
Diane must be.
She was initially disqualified for being a man, but has since, I think they have since agreed, and then, who's that, they've since agreed to allow her to compete, but. Diane is transgender. Mary, by the way, these are not real names. Mary, by the way, started hormones at 13. So she had parents that were receptive to her gender presentation. This is what happens when girls get appropriate medical treatment prior to puberty. They're not going to be men. Diane is, she's actually played in one of the James Bond films. That's Carolyn Cozy. The Lois on the bottom, that's our yes, she's just had a case come up in Texas, actually. Interesting case. Texas is kind of a bitter state when it comes to transgender issues or any women's issues. They just defeated Wendy Davis down there, I can't believe it, but she was identified as a male at birth. She has partial AIS. AIS is androgen insensitivity syndrome. The other 3 women have a complete AIS. What that means is that they have normal male parts, except for the penis, and they produce testosterone just like other males, but their body is incapable of processing testosterone. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier about how everyone is a female at the start, and we would all look like females if it was not for testosterone. Their bodies are incapable of processing that testosterone. Most of these women are AIS advocates because, of course, they were denied that information. Created a lot of chaos and confusions in their lives, created some serious health risks because undescended testicles are very susceptible to cancer. So these are some of the issues that arise when we try to conceal medical issues from people. And these are medical issues. We've made them about sex. And then, so Lois is the other trans woman. Because she was identified male at birth, but when she hit puberty, she didn't develop as a male, she developed as a female. And her parents allowed her to live as a female. And she got married. And then her husband was killed. Her husband was a fireman. Her husband got killed I believe in a fire. And now the family is trying to get her the husband's benefits, claiming that she was a man, and same-sex marriage is not legal in Texas. And I think she just won that case. So I think they are recognizing the marriage. But again, these are some of the complexities of law and culture that surround the transgender civil rights movement. Questions?
Yes. She and her deceased husband domiciled together. Did they have children?
Who?
Lois.
I'm not sure. I think they do have 2 children. Yeah, 2 children.
If they have children together.
It's Nikki Arguez. You can look it up on the web afterwards if you want to.
They have no right to deny her benefits, and therefore.
Well, yeah.
She won the case.
I'm not prepared or even qualified really to get into all of the legal ramifications of this, but needless to say, yes, it's complicated.
But
same-sex marriage has made it a little bit easier for transgender people because we don't have that particular problem anymore in most states, but it's still not the ultimate solution. And then here's a transgender couple. As I said, this is about girls tonight and women, but there are approximately as many female to male transgender men. These are transgender men now. Okay, does that help clarify the language, sir?
Yes.
When we're talking about transgender men, that would be these. The previous screen would be transgender women.
Yes.
And Nick and Bianca, I'd love to meet this couple actually. So the father actually delivered the children. He's presented some rather interesting conversations outlined. This couple is they are gods in the transgender community for sure. In part, I guess, because they're the perfect normal couple, right? They'd beat out Leave It to Beaver any day. And then, so I just want to make the point that it's kind of a 50-50 thing, which tends to suggest that it's kind of a genetic thing as well. But anyone want to guess which one's the boy and which one's the girl? Trick question. They're both boys. Sorry about that. But it is very difficult to distinguish children if you don't without that presentation that we use to distinguish them. This is Jay Bates, again another transgender man. He was female to male. He is, to date, the only transgender athlete we have had in Minnesota. He played for the Hopkins School District. He was, even though he was female to male, he played on the female track team. Apparently there weren't too many issues. He changed in the nurse's office, and even though he technically qualified legally and socially and culturally and according to the Child Protection League as a girl, he didn't shower with the girls. And I'm not surprised. Brave young man. And they also want to make it an issue of fairness. I was at the board meeting when the Minnesota State High School League discussed this. This is one of the attorneys that came forward and said it's just not fair to the 99%. This is an attorney now talking about what's fair. Oh, good. I'm glad I don't have to explain that one too much. First of all, let me go back here. First of all, we're talking about women, right, or girls, so it's 50% at best. And second of all, we're talking about girl athletes. So, he's really just expressing his own prejudices here.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
Are there currently transgender girls playing on Minnesota girls' teams?
No. There was one girl that testified at the Minnesota State High School League that is still playing on a boys' team. Apparently that hasn't worked very well for her. She's kind of withdrawn from sports. It's kind of unfortunate, but she's there trying to promote this for other girls. So, I'd like to delve a little more into this idea of fairness. We looked at Clay Matthews earlier in the NFL football. Average salary $2.1 million, highest $17 million, maximum earnings of $43 million. There's different ways of looking at professional football player sports. According to Forbes, you look at National Basketball Association players, they make $5 million, baseball $3 million. Hockey, $2.4 million. There's a lot of whining in the NFL about how low paid they are.
Yeah, I know.
You got to feel sorry for them. So this is, there's opportunities in the NFL for women as well. Average pay $85 a game. Okay, but they do get to see all the games for free. That's quite a privilege. This is what we refer to as female privilege. Okay? They also get to show off those hot bodies and be googled by millions of men. Girls love that stuff. Right? These women work hard. I don't know if any of you know any cheerleaders. They're community activists. They do a lot of community outreach. Most of them have careers. They spend a lot of time practicing for these performances. They do some really heavy-duty physical workouts and perform some pretty dangerous stunts. Amazing women, actually. I can't believe $85 a game. This is the Women's National Basketball Association minimum. They can be paid, and there is actually some lower minimums depending on how long they've been in the game and what the draft rate was. But the minimum is approximately about $40,000. The maximum you can pay a women's national basketball player is $105,000. We're talking about equal pay for equal work here. So this is Title IX. Does anybody know what I've heard about Title IX? Title IX is actually most often referred to as the success of girls' sports. Is really what created the girls' sports. It was instituted in 1965. A couple of different ways schools can follow their compliance. In 1971, let's see, we had just 285,000 girls in high school varsity athletics. By 2001, that number jumped to 2.8 million. It's still a common idea today that we don't really need girls' athletics because girls really just don't care for sports. I think it's getting to be a really weak argument, and the idea is really revolves around opportunity. You don't express much interest in sports if you don't have an opportunity to play sports, right? When I was in school, there was no girls' athletics. There were virtually no extracurricular activities at all. There was football, basketball, and baseball for boys. Of course, I grew up as a girl. I had no exposure to athletics. I had no possibility of making any of those, qualifying for any of those teams. I was kind of lucky. We had, they just started wrestling. So I went out for the wrestling team, and they took pretty much everybody that tried out. And you know, nobody really thought too much about a girl wrestling with boys in front of a packed auditorium at the regionals, but I did. So it's really about opportunity. I fully believe that. I would never been able to play sports because I was never exposed to sports. So Title IX has been hugely successful. It has from the beginning faced really tough opposition. Right from the start, Senator John Tower introduced this bill to exempt revenue-producing sports. And this is really significant, and this is what's happening today. They want to do the same. The National College Athletic Association, of course, said it was unfair. Again, it was unfair to be taking away opportunities for boys and giving them to girls. And it had some negative consequences. Women's athletics, basketball championships used to be managed by the Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. After Title IX, the NCAA started doing their own championships. Again, men really took over that sport. That's kind of unfortunate. Some men's sports are being dropped. But even today, what's it say? Female students receive 1.3 million fewer opportunities to participate in high school athletics than their male peers. So there's still a fair amount of inequity here in terms of girls' athletics. And studies have shown too that girls' athletics, I think as parents, as educators, as taxpayers, we really need to ask ourselves, why do we have these athletic programs in the first place? Are we trying to teach sportsmanship, teamwork, cooperation, pride, health, physical conditioning? Or are we preparing students for professional sports? And I think the answer to that should be pretty clear, actually. One of the major benefits, so at girls' athletics has had a lot of significant consequential benefits for women in terms of higher education, the types of roles, careers they select, and it's been a major determinant in reducing obesity among young girls. The only program that's ever had any success in that area. We need women's athletics. Now, aside from that, so they want to exempt revenue-producing sports, and let's take a look at why that is. What was that this year? Some of you men might know. Again, I'm not much of a football player, but they introduced a new playoff format for college football this year, right? Anyway, ESPN, yeah. So ESPN is pumping in $7.3 billion in TV contracts for college sports. This is a quote here from Cardinal Jones. He's a quarterback for Ohio State this year. I'm not sure what bowl he played in either, but he said, "Why should we have to go to class if we came here to play football? We ain't come to play school. Classes are pointless." Yeah, and this is the mentality that's developing, right? Again, why do we have athletics in high school? And what are we trying to teach our kids? He's starting quarterback for Alabama in the Sugar Bowl this year. And, we have college football coaches or NFL football coaches that are leaving the NFL and going to the college football because the pay is higher. Nick Saban's getting $7 million this season to coach Alabama. A lot of money. And here it again, you know, equal pay for equal work. NBA, $5 million. Women's National Basketball Association, $105,000. There's some serious gender inequity. And this is, you know, that's basically the problem with gender inequity. You know, we talk about, politicians love to talk about equal pay for equal work, right? Well, what constitutes equal work? And a big issue in gender equity, of course, is in the careers that women choose and the opportunities that are available to women. There's a lot of talk about now moving women into science and technology and engineering and math. That if women want to have gender equity, then they need to be able to compete with men. Which kind of abandons or minimizes or discounts the traditional roles that women have had. You know, if we want to be a civilized culture, we certainly need childcare. We need education. We need somebody to take care of the sick and the aging. Women have taken on these roles, and women continue to take on these roles. Women do still most of the volunteer work in this country, most of the social organizing, most of the things that make our culture a culture, and they don't get paid for it. So that's the real serious problem that we have in, you know, establishing gender equity. And girls' sports has been a major impetus towards advancing women in all areas of education and economic development. So National Girls and Women's Sports Day is coming up February 4th, and their theme this year is Game On. So say the date. Yes.
Yes, my daughter is in varsity in Central Illinois. Chose, you know, basketball.
Mm-hmm.
And the coach from ISU girls basketball team came to see her 2 different times last year. And they say she's headed toward becoming a chosen person for ISU girls basketball team. With that for advanced. And she says, my current coach doesn't like me anymore at the high school. And I said, why is that? She said, because even though I make A's and B's, she thinks that, you know, that's where it ends, is at high school. I thought, oh my goodness, you know, I mean, my daughter's planning a career in women's basketball.
Yeah, and that's kind of a challenge for schools, school boards, athletics. This filtering down of money in sports. I see this in certain school districts. We're starting to see with districts with there's a large inequality of wealth. Where sporting events are becoming revenue-producing events, okay, which means students are being required to go to their high school games. And now we're seeing a population of students that can't afford to go to those games. I see those issues being discussed in different school districts and school boards. It's, I'm offering, I guess, information here and going to challenge some of the thinking. I'm not really offering solutions at this point, other than to emphasize the importance of girls' sports and gender equity. But and to emphasize the enormous influence of wealth in our culture. We look at the stadium, for example. Minnesota taxpayers did not want to pay for a new stadium. Instead of a new stadium, we got 3 new stadiums. We got the Gopher Stadium, we got the Target Center, and now we're getting a new football stadium. That was not the will of the taxpayers. Anything else? Have I cleared up anything? Have I created more confusion? Have I given you anything to think about?
Well, before you close it, it seems to me the issue that you started with was what I would call the trauma of gender change in little children, adults, whatever. And while I understand and I agree with your comments about gender equity, equality, financial opportunity, etc., I don't see those 2 issues as being very directly related. I'm really interested in how the child that goes through what you went through, if I may be so bold to say, or any of those people that you showed on the photograph, how did they deal with it in their heads? And frankly, how did the other kids on the team where I'm confused as to what gender they were? I guess if I was transing at the age of 14 from a male to a female, and then I was going to play on the female team, is that basically the situation that would happen? Mm-hmm. Then let me just finish my stupid remark that I made, 'cause I'm not sure what foundation I have in this. But I think there are a lot of people at risk, as certainly the parents of and the child that's transitioning, but also the kids that are there. I don't know how 10, 14-year-old girls could suddenly deal with a 14-year-old trans. And I'd like you to talk about those kind of emotional impacts, if you can, but maybe the hour's gone by, and maybe it's irrelevant, but that seems to me to be the real horror of this situation. And while I'm very happy for it's not legislation, but it is a policy, I think that's good, I support it, but what are we doing for these children that are impacted, is what I guess.
Well, I mean, that is a very good question. Thank you. Let me talk a little bit about my own experience. One of the questions, I talked about all of the questions I've answered over the years. One of the questions that was pretty common as well was, how do you know you're a girl? How do you know you're a woman if you've never been a man? Transgender women will say that they've known since they were young children that they've always been a girl, a woman in a man's body. And I can ask them the same question: how do you know you're a man? What distinguishes you from women? What makes you different other than that simple piece of anatomy? And I think that, if any of us take the time to think about that, we certainly recognize the difference. As a transgender woman, understanding that I was very different, I knew very consciously when I was acting like a girl and when I was acting like a man, because it was very, very important to me to emulate male behavior so that people would not find out that I was not what I was pretending to be. So this is kind of the nature of transgender. Okay, you see the world very differently because you have a society that's telling you one thing, and you have an internal organization and an experience that's telling you something completely different. Okay, so that's from the transgender perspective, right? And it is no small challenge, okay? It's very, there's a lot of confusion about it because you're receiving messages from your culture that conflict with what you believe and what you experience. Transition is a very slow process, okay, just a physical transition. I'm kind of a unique person in that I have transitioned in a very open and very public way. Hundreds of people have seen my transition, have participated in a lot of different ways. And it's been, good 4 or 5 years. Even in the beginning, just simple things like changing your name, and, trying to get the courts to change your documentation to get female on your license so your ID matches your name and your identity. It goes on and on and on. And it is difficult and confusing. Now that's someone like myself, an older person that has spent many, many years trying to emulate male behavior, trying to act like a man, trying to become a man, going to therapy and trying to figure out how to relieve myself of this feminine identity. It's not quite the same for younger kids. If they have a supportive environment, and of course for most trans people, including myself, you pretty much, it changes your whole life, okay? You lose friends, you lose family, you lose jobs. It's such a state of flux that makes it difficult to deal with all those previous relationships. They have a difficult time accepting you because they've always known you one way, and now they see you as something completely different. But for younger people, so it's no small challenge. But for younger people, they see a very different culture than we grew up in. Okay, I like to say when I was a child, there was only 2 kinds of people, right? There was Catholics and there was Lutherans. My mother tells me when she was a child, there was only one kind. There was Lutheran Norwegians. But younger children, and these are some of the things to really fully appreciate. You need to go out there and experience the kind of lives that these children are dealing with. But they live in a very different world than we do. Okay, they see the cultural diversity. They live through all of this activism for gay and lesbian marriage equality. And they don't respond to it the same way we do. They don't have the fear and anxiety that we do. And this is the nature of the Child Protection League. They're preying on our sentiments as adults and the fear that we have for our children, right? They're not really addressing what the children are dealing with. They live in a very different world, and they're much more open to it. And I would say personally from my own experience, that women, of course, are far more accepting of my femininity, my identity as a woman, than are men. Okay, I think it's far more difficult for men. Because men in our culture are really brought up in a state of kind of emotional isolation. I'm the man, I gotta be tough. Men don't cry, except in maybe extreme circumstances, or will allow it. But so, it's like men are not allowed to communicate with each other in any kind of emotional or feeling way, right?
Communicating with you right now.
That was very good. I applaud you, gentlemen. We are making progress here tonight. So it's just they just live in a very different world.
We have about 10 more minutes before we're supposed to wrap up. There's a question in the back,
Okay.
and there's another question over here. So
Yeah.
please keep asking questions.
You mentioned fear and anxiety. If you're willing, could you share a moment, a time when you just felt utter despair, and what it was that gave you the courage to get out of that, and what gives you hope to have pursued your real identity?
Yeah, I was hoping nobody would ask that question. The depths of my life. Well, you know, as a parent, transgender parent, I was in the opposite situation, okay? I had a spouse that was dreadfully fearful that people would find out, that my children, that people at school would find out, and then my children would be harassed because their father was a woman, a trans woman. And so they decided, her and her attorney, that I wasn't fit to be a parent. They put me out on the street. I wasn't allowed to see my son. I lost my son. I wasn't willing to abandon my son as the primary care parent, as the mom, really. I viewed myself really as the mother. I pretty much had full responsibility for those children. Took them to daycare, picked them up until they were in kindergarten. And so that was the custody battle and representing trans rights. After 2 years, that was ugly because the court treated me, they filed a false order of protection accusing me of abusing my son. And the court pretty much treated that as legitimate. I was basically the defendant in the case for the first 2 years. Every time I went into court, I was being threatened with something. Felony charges, jail time, loss of visitation rights, attorney's fees. It was very discouraging. And after 2 years of that, I decided I was going to drink myself to death. So that was my low point. What was the rest of the question?
What gave you
And
what motivated you to get out of that?
And what motivated me to get out of that, and of course, was the same thing that got me there in the first place, was the love of my children. And, you know, probably the grace of God. Just before I was about to sign my son away, actually, I was in a pretty serious car accident. And so I went to the doctor because I was in a lot of pain, and he told me, ran some blood tests, and said, you know, you quit drinking, you can die. And that's when things kind of clicked for me. And I realized that I wouldn't be much use to my son if I went through with that plan. That's when I quit drinking. That's when I started fighting back. I did eventually get full custody of my son. Got my house back. And he still lives with me. I love my son. He's absolutely amazing. So, that's, you know, and a lot of transgender people, that's probably maybe one of the more severe cases, but a lot of transgender people could tell you some of the same stories. So, thank you for asking that.
Are we done? Yes. I just.
One more?
One of them is a question from the pub. As you can see here, here, we'll hold this up. This is the new bathroom sign that's being required to make public bathrooms safer for transgender people. They're saying that single occupancy bathrooms in, I think it's California now, must be made accessible to people of both genders. So, what patrons of the cow, what do you say? Shall we do it?
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming.
Well, let's
Yes.
hear what Paula has to say about it.
Let me say one more thing about bathrooms. I mean, it's absolutely horrifying how much time transgender people spend talking about bathrooms. But, you know, I would say that as a mother, or, you know, presenting as a male, my first experience with bathroom issues really had nothing to do with transgender. Okay, in those days I was presenting as a male. There were no changing tables in male bathrooms at that time. You know, I changed my children in the car or some quiet place on the floor. So that's part of the evolution that's gone along with this gender-neutral space. It's just family-neutral space. So it's a good thing for all of us. Not just a trans issue anymore. It's not just for trans people anymore. So thank you very much. You've been a very gracious audience.
Thank you so much, Paula. And thank you all for coming and supporting CowTalks. We appreciate it.
Next one.
In the next CowTalks, which will be the second week of February, the 12th, will be a representative of the ACLU talking about freedom of speech and freedom of inquiry. So please come back again.
Wow.